Hello, my name is Harold Whitman. I'm 65 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought I knew my own daughter. I still remember the sound of her laughter echoing through our small home in Burlington, Vermont, when she was just a little girl. The way her eyes would light up when I'd come home from work at the hardware store I've owned for over 30 years. The pride in her voice when she introduced me to her friends. "This is my dad," she'd say, for simple words that meant the world to me. After Emily, my wife of nearly 4 decades, passed away 4 years ago from breast cancer, Sarah was my rock. She'd call every day from Boston, where she works as a marketing executive. She'd fly up at least once a month. "Dad, you need to eat more vegetables," she'd scold while filling my refrigerator. "Dad, you can't wear that sweater with those pants," she'd laugh while reorganizing my closet. "Dad, I worry about you being alone," she'd whisper while hugging me goodbye. When I finally told Sarah last Christmas that I'd met someone, the silence on the phone was deafening. "Her name is Diane," I said, my voice shaking slightly as I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Emily and I had shared thousands of meals. "She volunteers at the community center. She teaches watercolor classes. We've been having coffee after my woodworking sessions." More silence. "She's 58, I added quickly. "She was widowed too, about 6 years ago." That's nice, Dad," Sarah finally responded, her voice flat. "I'm happy for you." But she wasn't. I knew my daughter. I could hear it in her voice, the same tone she used when she was 16, and I wouldn't let her go to a concert 3 hours away with kids I didn't know. The same tone she used when she was 22, and I suggested that perhaps marrying her college boyfriend right after graduation might be rushing things. A tone that said, "I'm going to be polite, but I completely disagree with you." I should have recognized the warning signs. The way she suddenly became too busy to visit. The short responses to my texts about Diane. The changed subject whenever I mentioned that Diane and I had gone somewhere together. But I was happy for the first time in years. Diane brought color back into my world. She didn't try to replace Emily. Nobody could, but she created her own space. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She challenged me to try new foods. She held my hand during movies, her fingers intertwined with mine, a small gesture that made me feel less alone in this world. "You should bring Diane to Sarah's birthday dinner next month," my sister Janet suggested during our weekly phone call. "It's time they met." I hesitated. "Sarah hasn't exactly been enthusiastic about me dating." "Harold," Janet sighed, "Sarah is 36 years old. She's a grown woman. She needs to accept that you deserve happiness too." So I invited Diane to join us for Sarah's birthday dinner at the Mill, the fanciest restaurant in our small town. Sarah was flying in from Boston, and my sister Janet and her husband would be there too. I thought having other people around might ease the tension. I'll never forget the look on Sarah's face when Diane and I walked into the restaurant together. A flash of something, shock, disgust, betrayal, before she composed herself and stood to greet us. "So you're Diane," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I've heard so much about you." Dinner was uncomfortable, to say the least. Sarah kept bringing up memories of her mother, directing her comments only to me, as if Diane wasn't sitting right beside me. "Remember Mom's lasagna, Dad? No one could make it like her. Remember that trip to Maine, Dad? Mom was so scared of the lobsters." Each memory was a dart, and I could feel Diane tensing beside me. But she remained gracious, asking Sarah about her work, complimenting her earrings, trying so hard to establish some connection. When Sarah excused herself to go to the restroom, Janet followed her. "I'm sorry," I whispered to Diane. "She's having a harder time with this than I expected." Diane squeezed my hand under the table. "It's okay, Harold." She lost her mother. She's protecting her memory. I understand. When Janet and Sarah returned, Sarah seemed calmer. She even asked Diane about her watercolor classes. I felt hope bloom in my chest. Maybe this would work out after all. After dinner, when we were saying our goodbyes in the parking lot, Sarah hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied, relief washing over me. If only I'd known what was coming. 3 days later, I was at the hardware store when my phone started buzzing incessantly. First it was Janet calling. Then it was my friend Richard. Then it was Diane. "Harold," Diane's voice was shaking. "Have you seen what Sarah posted online?" "What?" "No," I replied, confusion washing over me. "What are you talking about?" She took pictures of us at dinner. She posted them on her Instagram with a video." My hands started trembling so badly I had to sit down. "What kind of video?" "She's talking about us. About you. Saying I'm a gold digger after your money. That I'm disrespecting her mother's memory. That you're having a midlife crisis. Harold, there are hundreds of comments. People are sharing it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My Sarah, my little girl, would never do something like this. There had to be some mistake. But there wasn't. When I pulled up Sarah's Instagram page, there it was. Photos of Diane and me at the restaurant, clearly taken surreptitiously. And a 5-minute video of Sarah, her eyes red from crying, talking directly to the camera. "So this is my dad's new girlfriend," she was saying, making air quotes around the word girlfriend. "For years after my mom died of cancer, and he brings this woman to my birthday dinner. Look at her, wearing all that jewelry, laughing too loud, touching my dad constantly. You can't tell me she's not after his money. Dad owns his own business. He has a nice house. And she's just swooped in when he's vulnerable." I felt physically ill as I continued to watch, as Sarah shared intimate details about my grief after losing Emily, about private conversations we'd had, about my financial situation. She even mentioned that Diane had stayed overnight at my house, something I hadn't even told Sarah, which meant she must have driven by and seen Diane's car in the driveway. The comments below the video were even worse. Friends of Sarah's calling me disgusting. Strangers speculating about my relationship with Diane in crude terms. People I'd never met judging my life, my choices, my heart. The bell above the store door jingled, and I looked up to see my neighbor Tom walking in. He stopped when he saw me, an uncomfortable expression crossing his face. "Hey, Harold," he said awkwardly. "Just need some nails." I nodded mutely, unable to form words. Did he know? Had he seen the video? The shame crashed over me in waves. By the time I closed the store that evening, the video had over 20,000 views. My phone had dozens of missed calls and messages. It seemed everyone in Burlington had seen my daughter publicly humiliate me. I sat in my parked car outside the store, unable to drive home, unable to face anyone. I finally understood what had really happened at that birthday dinner. Sarah hadn't accepted Diane at all. She'd been documenting, gathering material for her public takedown of both of us. My own daughter had betrayed me in the most public, most hurtful way imaginable. And I had no idea how to even begin dealing with the aftermath. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps us bring more real-life stories like Harold's to you. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to open the hardware store. For the first time in 32 years of business, I put a handwritten, closed, sign on the door. My hands trembled as I taped it to the glass, aware of the curious stares from people walking by on Main Street. Did they all know? Had they all seen the video? I sat in my truck for nearly 20 minutes, unable to decide where to go. Home felt like a trap, the store impossible. Finally, I drove to Lake Champlain, to a secluded spot Emily and I used to visit when we needed peace. The familiar view of the Adirondack Mountains across the water usually brought me comfort, but today it only intensified my loneliness. My phone buzzed again. Diane? I had been avoiding her calls since yesterday, ashamed to face even her.
Harold?
Her voice was gentle, concerned.
Are you okay?
The simple question broke something inside me. I hadn't cried since Emily's funeral, but now, sitting alone in my truck overlooking the water where I'd scattered my wife's ashes, I wept. Deep, guttural sobs that came from somewhere primal within me.
I don't understand.
I managed between breaths.
Why would she do this? What did I do wrong?
Diane was silent for a moment, just letting me release 4 years of bottled grief, shame, and now, betrayal.
You didn't do anything wrong, Harold,
she finally said.
Sarah is hurting, and she's lashing out. But what she did was cruel and unfair to both of us. The things people are saying about you, about us.
My voice caught.
I'm so sorry I brought this on you. Listen to me.
Diane's voice grew firmer.
I lost Michael after 30 years together. You lost Emily after nearly 40. We both know what real grief is. We've earned every moment of happiness we can find. I won't let Sarah's pain, legitimate as it may be, make me feel guilty for caring about you.
Her words washed over me like a bomb, but the wound was still raw.
I need to talk to her,
I said, wiping my face with my sleeve like a child.
I need to understand why. Harold, give yourself a day. Just one day before you do anything. You're hurting right now.
I knew Diane was right, but sitting still with this pain seemed impossible. When we hung up, I started driving aimlessly through the Vermont countryside, past the rolling hills and red barns that had been the backdrop of my entire life. Fields where I'd taught Sarah to fly a kite. Forests where we'd gone looking for maple trees to tap. Everything around me held memories of my daughter, of our life together. By evening, I'd made a decision. I parked outside Janet's house and knocked on her door.
Oh, Harold!
My sister's face crumpled when she saw me. She pulled me into a tight hug, and I could feel her anger on my behalf vibrating through her body.
Come in. Bill's made his famous beef stew. I can't stay,
I said, though the thought of sitting in my sister's warm kitchen, eating my brother-in-law's stew, was tempting.
I need to ask you something.
Janet tilted her head, waiting.
Do you think...
I had to clear my throat.
Do you think Emily would be disappointed in me? For being with Diane?
Janet's eyes widened, then filled with tears.
Harold James Whitman,
she said, using my full name like our mother used to do.
Emily loved you more than anything in this world except that daughter of yours. On her deathbed, and you know I was there, she made me promise to look after you, to make sure you wouldn't bury yourself with her.
Janet took my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 70s.
The last coherent thing your wife said to me was, "Don't let him be alone, Janet. He's terrible at being alone."
My sister's voice broke.
She knew you, Harold. She knew you needed someone to care for, someone to care for you. She would be heartbroken that Sarah is making you feel guilty for finding a bit of happiness.
I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat.
I'm driving to Boston tomorrow,
I said once I could form words again.
I need to talk to Sarah face to face.
Janet sighed.
Just be careful. She's hurting too, in her own way.
I know, I replied. And I did know. Despite everything, Sarah was still my little girl, still the baby I'd held in my arms, marveling at her tiny perfect fingers and toes. Still the child who had climbed into our bed during thunderstorms, who had sobbed in my arms after her first heartbreak, who had clutched my hand at her mother's funeral so tightly I thought my fingers might break. I called the part-time employee who helped at the store, asked him to cover for me tomorrow. Then I went home and packed an overnight bag. As I folded a clean shirt, I noticed a framed photo on my dresser: Emily, Sarah, and me at Sarah's college graduation. We were all beaming, Emily's arm around Sarah's waist, mine around Emily's shoulders. A perfect triangle of love and connection. Now the triangle was broken. Emily was gone, and the bond between Sarah and me felt frayed beyond repair. I picked up the photo, ran my thumb over Emily's smiling face.
"What do I do?"
I whispered to her image.
"How do I fix this?"
The photograph, of course, didn't answer. But somewhere deep inside, I felt a familiar warmth, a sense of Emily's steady presence that had guided me through 4 decades of marriage. We'd weathered so many storms together: money troubles in the early years, a miscarriage before Sarah was born, Emily's first cancer scare when Sarah was just 7. Each time, Emily had faced the challenge with a quiet strength that had always amazed me.
"One step at a time,"
she would say.
"Just focus on the next right thing."
So that's what I would do. The next right thing was to drive to Boston tomorrow. To look my daughter in the eye. To try to understand. I set the photo carefully back on the dresser and finished packing. As I zipped the bag closed, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane.
"Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you deserve happiness. Emily would want that for you. I'll be here when you get back."
I held the phone against my chest for a moment, grateful beyond words for this woman who had somehow found her way into my life. Then I set my alarm and tried to sleep, though rest eluded me for most of the night. The 5-hour drive to Boston the next day gave me too much time to think, to rehearse what I would say to Sarah, to imagine her responses. By the time I parked near her apartment building in Cambridge, my stomach was in knots. I hadn't told her I was coming. Part of me worried she wouldn't see me if she knew, and another part, a part one wasn't proud of, wanted to catch her off guard the way she had ambushed me with that video. I pressed the buzzer for her apartment, my heart pounding.
"Hello?"
Sarah's voice, slightly distorted through the intercom, still sent a wave of love and hurt through me simultaneously.
"It's Dad,"
I said simply. A long pause. Then the door buzzed open. I climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached her door, it was already open, Sarah standing in the doorway with her arms crossed over her chest. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a far cry from the polished marketing executive she usually presented to the world.
"Can I come in?"
I asked quietly. She stepped aside wordlessly. I entered the familiar apartment, noticing the photos of Emily that Sarah had prominently displayed on her bookshelf, her coffee table, her desk. More photos of Emily than had been there the last time I visited.
"Why are you here, Dad?"
Sarah finally spoke, her voice hoarse. I turned to face my daughter, really looking at her. Beyond the anger, beyond the puffy eyes and defensive posture, I saw something I recognized all too well: grief. Raw, unprocessed grief that had nowhere to go. And in that moment, I realized that while I had spent 4 years learning how to live without Emily, Sarah had never truly begun that process at all. Tentar novamente.
"Why am I here?"
I repeated Sarah's question, my voice catching.
"Because you're my daughter. Because 4 days ago, you shared our private life with thousands of strangers. Because I need to understand why."
Sarah's shoulders tensed, but beneath her defensive stance, I caught a glimpse of something else, a flicker of shame quickly masked by renewed anger.
"You really don't get it, do you?"
she said, moving to her living room window that overlooked the busy Cambridge street below.
4 years, Dad. Mom's been gone for 4 years, and suddenly you're parading around town with her. I wasn't parading. You brought her to my birthday dinner."
Sarah spun to face me, her voice cracking.
"My birthday. The first one Mom ever missed was after she died, and I've spent every birthday since then feeling her absence like a physical pain. And you thought that was the perfect time to introduce your girlfriend?
The word girlfriend came out twisted and bitter, like she couldn't bear to say it. I sank onto Sarah's couch, suddenly exhausted.
I thought it would be easier with Janet and Bill there. I thought maybe if you saw how happy Diane makes me. How can you be happy?
Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, tears streaming down her face now.
How can you be happy when Mom is gone?
The raw pain in her question struck me like a physical blow. For the first time, I truly understood what was happening. Sarah wasn't just protecting her mother's memory. She was trapped in her grief, unable to move forward, and my relationship with Diane felt like a betrayal, like I was leaving Emily, and by extension, Sarah, behind.
Come here,
I said softly, patting the couch beside me. Sarah hesitated, then reluctantly sat down, keeping as much distance between us as the small couch allowed.
When your mother was diagnosed the second time,
I began carefully,
we knew the prognosis wasn't good. We had a lot of long talks during those final months. Hard talks.
I swallowed against the tightness in my throat, remembering those night conversations in our bed, Emily's body growing frailer as the cancer consumed her, her mind remaining sharp and clear-eyed to the end.
One night, about 2 weeks before she passed, she made me promise something. She took my hand. She was so thin by then that her wedding ring kept slipping off, and she said, "Harold, when I'm gone, I don't want you sitting alone in this house talking to my ghost. Life is for the living."
Sarah stared at her hands in her lap, tears dripping onto her fingers.
I fought her on it,
I continued, my own eyes blurring.
Told her I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. And you know what she said? She said, "That's because I'm not gone yet. But someday, if you're lucky enough to find someone who makes you smile again, who makes you feel less alone, don't you dare let guilt stop you."
A sob escaped Sarah, her body curling forward as if trying to protect herself from the weight of these words.
Your mother loved us both so much,
I said, reaching out slowly to touch my daughter's shoulder.
She wouldn't want either of us frozen in grief forever. I can't.
Sarah's words were almost inaudible.
I can't bear the thought of someone taking her place. In our family. In your heart. Oh, sweetheart.
I moved closer, gently turning her to face me.
No one could ever take Emily's place. Not in my heart, not in our family. Diane isn't a replacement. She's different. A new chapter.
Sarah looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears, vulnerability evident in every trembling line of her face.
But what if we lose her too? What if you lose her like we lost Mom? I can't watch you go through that pain again. I can't go through it again.
And there it was, the fear beneath the anger, the true heart of Sarah's resistance. She wasn't just protecting Emily's memory. She was trying to protect both of us from another devastating loss. I pulled my daughter into my arms the way I used to when she was small, and this time she didn't resist. She collapsed against my chest, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her being.
That's the risk of loving anyone,
I whispered into her hair.
We might lose them, but the alternative is never loving at all. Your mother would say that's no way to live.
We sat like that for a long time, my aging arms around my grown daughter, both of us finally releasing years of unspoken grief and fear. The afternoon light shifted in the apartment, casting long shadows across the floor as we began the painful work of healing. Later, after we'd both calmed, after I'd made us tea the way Emily used to when one of us was upset, Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me the Instagram post.
I'm so ashamed,
she whispered, her eyes downcast.
I was so hurt and angry after dinner. I felt like you were erasing Mom. Like you were replacing our family with a new one. I had too much wine when I got home, and I just... I lost it.
The view count had risen to over 50,000. The comments section was a battlefield of strangers arguing about our private pain, some defending Sarah, others calling her selfish and cruel, all of them feasting on our family tragedy like vultures.
I can delete it,
Sarah said quietly.
but people have already shared it. Screenshots are everywhere. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never thought it would go viral like this.
I stared at the screen, at the image of Diane and me at the restaurant, caught in a moment of private happiness now dissected by thousands of strangers.
You need to apologize to Diane too,
I said firmly.
What you did hurt her deeply.
Sarah's face tightened momentarily, then relaxed as she nodded.
I know. I will. And Sarah,
I set the phone down, taking both her hands in mine.
I need you to truly hear me. I loved your mother with everything in me. For 40 years, she was my heart. That doesn't just disappear. But I'm still here, still alive. I can hold both the love I had for her and the feelings I'm developing for Diane. There's room and a heart for both.
Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but they were different now, clearer, less bitter.
Mom would be so mad at me for doing this to you,
she said with a watery smile. I chuckled despite everything.
She'd give you that look. You know the one. With the left eyebrow up and the right one down.
Sarah laughed softly through her tears.
And she'd say, Sarah Elizabeth Whitman.
We recited together, mimicking Emily's stern tone. For just a moment, it felt like Emily was there with us, her presence filling the space between us with warmth and forgiveness.
I'm going to post a public apology,
Sarah said decisively, straightening her shoulders.
It won't undo the damage, but it's a start. And then maybe I could meet Diane again. Properly this time.
I squeezed her hands.
I'd like that. But first, I think we both need some time. This has been a lot for everyone.
Sarah nodded.
Will you stay tonight? We can order from that Chinese place you like. I'd like that,
I said, feeling a cautious hope unfurling in my chest. That evening, as we sat among the takeout containers in Sarah's living room, she asked me to tell her stories about her mother that she hadn't heard before. Not the polished family anecdotes we always shared, but the messy, human stories, the fights we'd had and overcome, the mistakes we'd made, the imperfect moments that made up a real marriage. And as I talked, I watched something shift in my daughter's eyes. The idealized image of Emily she'd been desperately preserving began to give way to something more real, more human, and ultimately more honoring of who her mother had truly been, not a saint or an impossible standard, but a complex woman who had lived and loved with her whole heart.
She wasn't perfect,
Sarah said softly as I finished telling her about the time Emily and I didn't speak for 3 days over a ridiculous argument about wallpaper.
I've been acting like she was. None of us are,
I replied.
That's the beauty of love, seeing someone's flaws and loving them anyway.
Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said,
Tell me about Diane. The real her, not just the sanitized version you thought I could handle.
I smiled, grateful for this olive branch.
Well, for starters, she absolutely cannot cook. She tried to make me dinner last month and nearly burned down her kitchen.
By the time we went to bed that night, Sarah in her room, me on her surprisingly comfortable couch, something fundamental had shifted between us. The chasm wasn't completely bridged, but we had taken the first tentative steps across the divide. As I drifted toward sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane.
Whatever happens, I'm here. Take all the time you need.
I typed back.
Coming home tomorrow. Things are better. Tell you everything then.
For the first time in days, I fell asleep without that crushing weight on my chest. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Sarah's viral video had exposed our private lives to public scrutiny in ways that couldn't be undone, but we had found our way back to each other. And in the end, that was what mattered most. What I didn't know was that our journey through this painful chapter was far from over. The morning would bring new challenges I couldn't have anticipated, testing the fragile peace we had only just begun to rebuild. The morning light filtered through Sarah's apartment windows as I awoke on her couch, my back stiff but my heart lighter than it had been in days. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the sounds of Sarah moving around in her kitchen, the familiar clink of coffee mugs bringing me back to countless mornings when she was a teenager, both of us navigating the quiet morning routine in our home while Emily slept in on weekends. I reached for my phone on the coffee table and immediately felt my stomach drop. 27 missed calls. Dozens of text messages. Something was wrong. Most of the calls were from Janet, with a few from my employee at the hardware store and several from Diane. I clicked on Janet's most recent voicemail with trembling fingers.
Harold, you need to come home. Now!
My sister's voice was tight with controlled panic.
The store. Someone broke the windows last night. There's graffiti. It's bad, Harold. Really bad. The police are here. Call me as soon as you get this.
I sat up abruptly, my heart pounding. Sarah appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands, her expression shifting from hopeful to concerned when she saw my face.
Dad? What's wrong?
I couldn't find the words at first, just held up my phone with the voicemail still playing. Sarah set the mugs down and took the phone, listening as her face drained of color.
Oh my God,
she whispered, her free hand covering her mouth.
This is my fault. This is because of what I posted.
I was already standing, gathering my things, trying to think clearly through the shock.
I need to go. Now! I'm coming with you,
Sarah said firmly, already moving toward her bedroom.
Give me 5 minutes to pack a bag.
The drive back to Burlington was a blur of tension and fear. Sarah sat beside me in the passenger seat, her face ashen, her fingers constantly scrolling through her phone.
Dad, it's everywhere,
she said, her voice hollow.
Someone identified your store in the comments of my video. There are people calling you horrible things, saying you took advantage of Mom's death to chase younger women.
She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears.
Diane isn't even that much younger than you. Why would they say these things?
I gripped the steering wheel tighter.
People love a narrative, Sarah. The truth doesn't matter as much as the story they want to believe. I posted an apology video. I explained everything, told them how wrong I was.
She wiped her eyes.
But it's just getting more comments, more shares. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know if it would be. The world had changed while I wasn't looking. In my day, family fights stayed within the family. Now, our private pain had become public entertainment, twisted and distorted through the lens of strangers' perceptions. When we finally pulled into Burlington 5 hours later, Janet was waiting at my house, pacing on the front porch. She rushed to the truck as I parked, her face lined with worry.
Thank God you're home,
she said, then noticed Sarah. A flash of anger crossed her features before she controlled it.
You're both going to want to sit down before we go to the store.
Inside, Janet pulled out her phone and showed us the photos she'd taken that morning. My hardware store, the business I'd built from nothing over 3 decades, the place where I'd taught Sarah to count change and stack inventory, the legacy I'd planned to sell for my retirement, was vandalized almost beyond recognition. The plate glass windows had been shattered, shards glittering across the sidewalk. Across the brick facade, someone had spray-painted the words, cheater, and other obscenities I couldn't bear to read aloud. Inside, it looked like a tornado had hit, with merchandise scattered and broken across the floor.
The police said it happened around 3 a.m.,
Janet explained, her voice gentle as she watched the color drain from my face.
The security cameras caught 3 teenagers. They were wearing masks, but...
She hesitated.
But what?
I asked, a sick feeling growing in my stomach.
One of them was wearing a Letterman jacket from Burlington High. They think it might be local kids.
Sarah made a choked sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob.
Kids who saw my video. Who thought they were, what? Defending Mom's honor? Getting justice for me?
The reality of what had happened, was still happening, hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a daughter's emotional reaction to her father dating again. This had spiraled into something dark and destructive, something with real-world consequences that couldn't be undone with apology videos or heart-to-heart talks.
There's more,
Janet said quietly. She scrolled through her phone and showed us another photo, this one of Diane's front door. Someone had taped printed pages all over it, what looked like screenshots from Sarah's video, with cruel comments written across them.
Is Diane okay?
I asked, my voice barely audible.
She's staying with her sister in Essex Junction,
Janet replied.
Harold, this is getting serious. The police want statements from both of you.
She looked pointedly at Sarah. My daughter was shaking now, tears streaming down her face.
I never meant for this to happen,
she whispered.
I was hurt and angry, but I never wanted anyone to get hurt or for property to be destroyed.
I wanted to comfort her, but a part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, was angry. Angry that her impulsive action had unleashed this chaos. Angry that my private life had been turned into a public spectacle. Angry that the business I'd spent my life building had been damaged by strangers who knew nothing about me, about Emily, about the complicated reality of grief and healing.
We need to go to the police station,
I said, my voice more controlled than I felt.
Then I need to see the store.
The rest of the day passed in a fog of official statements, insurance claims, and shock reunions with longtime customers who came to help clean up the mess. News of the vandalism had spread quickly through our small town, and by afternoon, dozens of people were at the hardware store with brooms, garbage bags, and words of support. Bill, my brother-in-law, had already boarded up the broken windows and was organizing a team to scrub the graffiti off the brick. My part-time employee, a college kid named Marcus, was carefully cataloging damaged inventory for the insurance claim. Throughout it all, Sarah stayed by my side, her face pale but determined as she explained again and again to concerned neighbors.
This was my fault. I posted something I shouldn't have. My dad didn't do anything wrong.
By evening, the worst of the physical damage had been addressed, though the store wouldn't be ready to reopen for at least a week. We returned to my house exhausted, emotionally drained, and still trying to process everything that had happened. As I fumbled with my house keys, Sarah touched my arm.
Dad, I want you to call Diane. Ask her to come over.
I looked at my daughter in surprise.
I need to apologize to her face to face,
Sarah said firmly.
And I need to start making things right.
Something shifted in my chest then, a small, tender sprout of pride pushing through the debris of the day's events. Despite everything, my daughter was showing the same moral courage that had always defined her mother.
Okay,
I said softly.
I'll call her.
An hour later, Diane's car pulled into my driveway. She sat inside for a long moment before getting out, her usual confident posture replaced with something more cautious, guarded. Sarah and I watched from the living room window, both of us nervous in different ways. When the doorbell rang, Sarah squeezed my hand.
Let me get it,
she said.
This is my responsibility.
I hung back in the living room doorway, watching as my daughter opened the door to the woman I'd come to care for deeply, the woman whose life had been upended by my daughter's actions.
Diane.
Sarah's voice was steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes.
Thank you for coming. I owe you the most sincere apology.
As I watched these two women, both so important to me in such different ways, begin the difficult, necessary work of healing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not the cautious optimism I felt in Boston, but a deeper, more resilient hope that perhaps, from the ashes of this painful chapter, something new and stronger might emerge. What none of us realized was that the worst was yet to come. The viral storm Sarah had unwittingly created was still gathering strength, about to test our newly forged bonds in ways none of us could have imagined. The evening with Diane and Sarah began awkwardly, 3 people circling each other in my small living room, each nursing wounds both fresh and deep. Sarah's apology had been sincere. I could see it in the trembling of her hands, the catch in her voice as she took full responsibility for what she'd done. Diane had accepted it with a grace that made my heart swell, though the wariness never fully left her eyes. We ordered pizza, the 3 of us picking at it, while making careful conversation that avoided the elephant in the room. The video was still spreading, still causing damage none of us could control.
I've spoken to a friend who works in social media crisis management,
Sarah said finally, setting down her barely touched slice.
She's helping me craft a statement and reach out to some of the larger accounts that shared the original video.
Diane nodded, her fingers nervously twisting the napkin in her lap.
That's good. Thank you.
The silence that followed felt heavier than before, until Diane cleared her throat and looked directly at Sarah.
Can I ask you something?
Her voice was gentle but firm.
Something I've been wondering since this all started?
Sarah straightened, bracing herself.
Of course. You said in your video that I'm after your father's money.
Diane's words were measured, careful.
I need to understand why you thought that. Was it something I said? The way I dress? I need to know what gave you that impression.
The question hung between them like a delicate, dangerous thing. I held my breath, watching my daughter's face as emotions flickered across it, defensiveness, shame, and finally, a kind of painful clarity.
It wasn't anything you did,
Sarah admitted, her voice small.
It was easier to believe you had ulterior motives than to accept that Dad might actually be moving on, that he could find happiness with someone who wasn't Mom.
The raw honesty of her words filled the room. Diane's expression softened as she reached across the coffee table to briefly touch Sarah's hand, a small gesture of understanding between 2 women who loved the same man in entirely different ways.
Your mother sounds like she was an extraordinary woman,
Diane said softly.
I wish I could have known her.
Something in Sarah's face changed then, a subtle shift I couldn't quite name.
She would have liked you,
she said, surprising both Diane and me.
Mom always said Dad needed someone who wouldn't let him get away with his brooding silences when he was upset.
We all laughed, the tension in the room easing just a fraction. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine a world where this might work, where my daughter and Diane might forge some kind of relationship, where the wounds of the past few days might eventually heal. But life rarely gives us the breathing room we need. Just as we were clearing away the pizza boxes, Sarah's phone began buzzing incessantly. She glanced at it, her face draining of color.
Dad,
she whispered, holding up the screen.
It's gone national.
And indeed it had. A major news website had picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about social media, family conflicts, and the unintended consequences of viral content. Our names were mentioned, blurred screenshots from Sarah's video included. The vandalism at my store was highlighted as an example of how online conflicts could spill into dangerous real-world consequences.
I'm so sorry,
Sarah kept repeating, her body trembling as she scrolled through the article.
I never imagined.
Diane moved to sit beside her on the couch, surprisingly calm as she read over Sarah's shoulder.
The article actually seems balanced,
she observed.
They're not vilifying any of us. They're using what happened as a way to talk about grief, family tensions, and social media ethics.
She was right. The piece wasn't sensationalized or cruel. If anything, it treated our situation with unexpected compassion, exploring the complex emotions that had led to Sarah's post and the aftermath none of us had anticipated. But balanced or not, our private pain was now being dissected by strangers across the country. And the comments section beneath the article was anything but compassionate, a battlefield of judgments, criticisms, and amateur psychoanalysis of our family dynamics.
"They're calling me a spoiled brat,"
Sarah said, her voice hollow as she scrolled through the comments.
"And you, oh Dad, the things they're saying about you."
I took the phone from her gently, turned it off, and set it on the coffee table.
"Enough. We can't control what strangers think of us. We can only control how we respond to it. Your father's right,"
Diane said, her steady voice an anchor in the storm.
"And tomorrow, I think we should respond together."
Sarah and I both looked at her in surprise.
"What do you mean?" I asked.
Diane straightened, a determined glint in her eye that reminded me of Emily when she'd set her mind to something.
"The three of us should do a joint statement. Not just Sarah apologizing, but all of us speaking honestly about grief, about healing, about the complicated reality of forming new relationships after loss. You'd do that?"
Sarah asked, her voice small with wonder.
"After everything I said about you?"
Diane's smile was sad but genuine.
"Sarah, I lost my husband after 30 years together. I know what grief can make you do, what it can make you think. I've been where you are, terrified that moving forward means leaving someone you love behind."
The words hung in the air between them, a bridge forming over the chasm that had seemed impassable just days ago. That night, after Diane had gone home and Sarah had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep in her old bedroom, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the untouched bottle of whiskey I'd pulled from the cabinet. Emily and I used to share a glass on difficult days, finding comfort in the ritual and each other's presence. I hadn't opened the bottle since her funeral. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet.
"Just saw the news article. You okay?"
I typed back.
"Getting there. Sarah and Diane are talking. Small miracles."
Janet responded immediately.
"Emily would be proud of you both. Get some sleep, big brother."
I set the whiskey bottle back in the cabinet unopened. Tonight, for the first time in 4 years, I didn't need it to feel close to Emily. I could feel her presence in the fragile new understanding between Sarah and Diane, in the community that had rallied around the store, in the quiet courage it had taken for all of us to face each other honestly after so much pain. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Sarah's voice drifting up from the kitchen. Curious, I made my way downstairs to find her sitting at the table, phone propped against the fruit bowl, talking to someone on video chat. As I got closer, I realized with surprise that it was Diane on the screen.
"We could record it here at Dad's house,"
Sarah was saying.
"It would show we're all together, that we're working through this as a family."
The word family seemed to catch in her throat, but she'd said it. Diane nodded on the screen, then noticed me hovering in the doorway.
"Good morning, Harold,"
she said with a warm smile.
"Your daughter and I have been planning."
Sarah turned, a hint of her old determination lighting her eyes.
"Dad, we're going to take control of this narrative. Our way, on our terms."
For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than dread when I thought about the future. These two remarkable women, one whom I'd loved for a lifetime through my marriage to her mother, the other whom I was just beginning to love, were forging something new from the ashes of our pain. What none of us could have anticipated was how this joint statement would affect not just our little family circle, but thousands of others wrestling with their own grief, their own struggles to move forward after loss. The storm we'd weathered was about to bring unexpected healing to people we'd never even met. The morning light filtered through my kitchen windows as Sarah, Diane, and I gathered around the small table, 3 coffee mugs forming a triangle between us. Sarah had set up her phone on a makeshift stand, a cookbook propped against the fruit bowl, while Diane smoothed her blouse nervously. I felt the weight of what we were about to do settle in my chest, both terrifying and somehow necessary.
Are we really ready for this?
I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers wrapping around mine with surprising strength.
We need to reclaim our story, Dad. The narrative got away from us, from me, and look what happened.
Her eyes held a determination I recognized from Emily, that same unflinching courage in the face of life's most difficult moments. I'd seen it when Emily faced her first cancer diagnosis, when she insisted on attending Sarah's college graduation despite her weakened state after chemotherapy, when she told me with perfect clarity that she wasn't afraid to die, only afraid of leaving us alone. Diane nodded, her presence quiet but steadying.
Harold, your daughter's right. People are going to talk either way. At least this time, they'll hear the truth from us.
The truth. Such a simple word for something so complex, so layered with grief and love and the messy, imperfect ways we try to heal. Sarah pressed record, and suddenly we were speaking not just to each other, but to the invisible audience that had been watching our family drama unfold from a distance, judging, speculating, never fully understanding the depth of what we'd experienced.
My name is Sarah Whitman.
My daughter began, her voice clear despite the emotion shimmering beneath the surface.
4 days ago, I posted a video about my father dating again 4 years after my mother's death from cancer. I was angry. I was hurt. And I used social media as a weapon, not understanding the damage it would cause.
She paused, drawing a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul.
What I didn't share in that video was how my mother spent her final days making sure both my father and I would be okay without her. How she made me promise to live fully, to not let grief define me. A promise I broke when I couldn't accept my father finding happiness again.
Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice remained steady, a testament to the strength she'd inherited from Emily.
The aftermath of my post has been devastating. My father's business was vandalized. Diane has been harassed. Our private pain became public entertainment. But the person I hurt most was myself, because in trying to protect my mother's memory, I betrayed the value she lived by: compassion, understanding, and above all, love.
Sarah turned to me then, and I saw not just my adult daughter, but glimpses of the little girl who'd once looked at me like I could fix anything broken in her world.
Dad, I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you and Diane. Mom would be so disappointed in how I handled this.
The vulnerability in her voice nearly broke me. I reached for her hand, struggling to find words adequate for this moment.
Sarah,
I finally managed.
Your mother's greatest fear wasn't being forgotten. It was that grief would trap us, keep us from living the full lives she wanted for us. She knew, better than anyone, that hearts are capable of holding both the love we've lost and the new love we find.
I turned to include Diane in my gaze, drawing strength from her quiet presence.
When you lose someone after 40 years together, there's an emptiness that never fully goes away. But Emily was right. Life is for the living. Finding joy again doesn't diminish what we had. It honors it.
Diane spoke next, her voice soft but unwavering.
I lost my husband Michael after 30 years together. I know the landscape of grief intimately, how it changes you, how it makes you afraid to open your heart again.
She looked directly at Sarah, woman to woman, survivor to survivor.
When I met your father, I wasn't looking for love. I was just trying to build a life that felt worth living again. We recognized in each other not just the pain of loss, but the courage it takes to begin again.
Her words hung in the air, simple and profound. I watched something shift in Sarah's expression, A softening, a recognition of the shared humanity that connected her to this woman she'd once viewed as an intruder.
The hardest part of losing someone you love,
Sarah admitted, her voice catching,
is feeling like you have to choose between holding on and moving forward. Like honoring their memory means staying frozen in time.
She looked down at her hands, then back up with newfound clarity.
But that's not what Mom would want. She always said life was for living, not for looking back with regret.
The three of us continued talking, not from any script but from the raw, honest place where healing begins. We spoke about Emily, her strength, her humor, the way she'd prepared us for her death with unflinching courage. We talked about grief's nonlinear path, about the guilt that comes with finding joy again, about the complicated reality of creating new connections while honoring those we've lost. When we finally ended the recording nearly 40 minutes later, we sat in silence, emotionally drained yet somehow lighter. Sarah wiped her eyes, looking between Diane and me with a vulnerability that reminded me of when she was young.
"Do you think it will make a difference?"
she asked softly.
"I don't know,"
I answered honestly.
"But it's our truth. And that matters."
After carefully editing the video down to 20 minutes, removing the most private details while preserving the emotional honesty, Sarah posted it on her Instagram with a simple caption,
"The full story. With my dad and Diane."
None of us expected what happened next. By evening, the video had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in, not the vicious judgments or cruel speculations of before, but message after message from people who had walked similar paths. Widows who spoke of finding love again and the guilt that accompanied it. Adult children struggling to accept parents' new relationships after loss. Families torn apart by grief, seeking ways to heal together.
"Your story is my story,"
wrote one woman.
"My father found someone new 2 years after Mom died. I couldn't bear it. I thought he was betraying her memory. Watching your conversation helped me understand what he's been trying to tell me. I lost my wife 3 years ago,"
wrote another commenter.
"I've met someone who makes me smile again, but my children won't even meet her. I'm sending them this video. Thank you for your courage."
Messages arrived from grief counselors asking permission to use the video in their work. A national morning show reached out, wanting to interview us about grief, healing, and the unexpected consequences of social media sharing. That night, Sarah sat cross-legged on my living room floor, scrolling through comments with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of pain this time, but of wonder at how our broken pieces, fitted together and held up to the light, could create something beautiful enough to help others heal.
"Dad,"
she whispered, looking up at me with Emily's eyes,
"I think Mom would be proud of us right now."
I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Because in that moment, I could feel Emily's presence more strongly than I had in years, not as a ghost haunting my memories, but as a light illuminating our path forward. Later, after Sarah had gone to bed and Diane had gone home with plans to return for breakfast, I stood on my back porch looking up at the Vermont sky studded with stars. I thought about how grief transforms us, not just in the breaking, but in how we choose to rebuild ourselves afterward. How healing rarely comes in the ways we expect or from the directions we anticipate.
"You were right, Em,"
I whispered to the night air, imagining my words rising to wherever she might be.
"Life really is for the living."
A gentle breeze rustled the maple trees, carrying the familiar scent of approaching autumn, Emily's favorite season. And for the first time in 4 years, remembering that fact brought me joy instead of pain. A small step, perhaps, but in the journey of grief, sometimes the smallest steps lead us home. What none of us realized then was that our story was just beginning. The video would open doors we never expected, creating ripples far beyond our small Vermont town, bringing healing not just to our fractured family, but to countless others struggling to find their way through the labyrinth of loss and renewal. The path ahead still held challenges, But something fundamental had shifted. We would face them together, three people connected not by blood or marriage, but by the courage to begin again. 6 months had passed since my life was exposed on social media. Time, that silent healer, had begun its gentle work of restoration in our fractured family. Snow blanketed Burlington like a shroud of peace, transforming the landscape into something new, untouched. Through the kitchen window, I watched Sarah and Diane building a snowman in the yard, their laughter forming small clouds in the frigid air. An image that would have seemed impossible just half a year ago.
"He needs your scarf, Dad,"
Sarah called, waving for me to join them. I picked up my old blue scarf, Emily's gift during our last Christmas together, and hesitated for a moment. There was something deeply symbolic about wrapping that piece of fabric, steeped in memories, around the neck of a snowman created together by Sarah and Diane.
"She'd approve, you know."
Janet's voice surprised me. My sister had arrived silently, carrying a covered dish.
"Emily always said memories were meant to be used, not stored away in boxes."
I nodded, feeling that familiar mixture of grief and gratitude that now accompanied memories of my late wife. No longer a dagger to the heart, but something gentler, like missing a song you once loved deeply, knowing you can still hum its melody even if you can't hear it played anymore. Outside, I handed the scarf to Sarah. Our fingers touched briefly, a current of understanding passing between us.
"Mom's scarf,"
she said softly, recognition flickering in her eyes.
"I think she'd like seeing it used on such a fine snowman,"
I replied. Sarah's eyes welled with tears, but they weren't the bitter tears of before. She wrapped the scarf around the snowman with deliberate care, adjusting it just so, the same meticulous attention Emily had always given to small details.
"Perfect,"
Diane said, stepping back to admire our creation. She slipped her hand into mine, a gesture that now felt natural, right? Not replacing what was lost, but creating something new alongside it. Later, as we gathered around my dining room table, Sarah, Diane, Janet, and Bill, and a few close friends, I marveled at how life reshapes itself around loss, not filling the empty spaces but creating new configurations that somehow honor what came before while embracing what lies ahead. The television in the living room was paused on the opening frame of our latest, After Loss, segment. The series had resonated beyond anything we could have imagined, touching thousands of families struggling through their own grief journeys. Sarah's marketing expertise had helped amplify our message, turning our personal pain into a beacon for others navigating similar waters.
"Before we eat,"
Sarah said, raising her glass,
"I want to toast something important."
She looked at me, then at Diane, her eyes clear and steady.
6 months ago today, I posted that video. The worst mistake of my life that somehow led to all of this.
She gestured around the table at the gathered faces, at the life we'd rebuilt from the ashes of misunderstanding and pain.
"Mom used to say that our worst moments hold the seeds of our greatest growth,"
she continued, her voice strong despite the emotion.
"I didn't understand what she meant until now."
Diane reached across to squeeze Sarah's free hand, a gesture that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago.
"To Emily,"
Diane said, raising her own glass,
"for teaching her family how to love so well that it continues even after she's gone." "To Emily,"
we all echoed. As dinner progressed, filling the house with warmth and conversation, I found myself watching Sarah and Diane together, my daughter, and the woman who had brought color back into my world. They weren't just tolerating each other for my sake anymore. Something genuine had grown between them, a relationship all their own, built on shared vulnerability and hard-earned understanding. Sarah had fully relocated to Burlington, breathing new life into our small town with her city energy. The hardware store was thriving again, now with a small coffee corner that Diane had helped design, where locals gathered to chat and connect. Most surprising of all was how our story had sparked a movement of sorts.
The grief after.
Support groups had formed in communities across New England, inspired by our television segments. People finding ways to honor those they'd lost while embracing new connections, new chapters. After dinner, as everyone helped clear the table, Sarah pulled me aside, her expression suddenly serious.
Dad, there's something I need to tell you.
My heart stuttered. Old fears die hard.
I found this in Mom's things,
she said, pulling a sealed envelope from her pocket.
It was in that old recipe box, the one I took to Boston. It's addressed to you. To be open when you find love again. Those are her exact words.
My hands trembled as I took the envelope, immediately recognizing Emily's handwriting, those distinctive loops and curves I had seen on shopping lists and love notes for 40 years.
I should have given it to you months ago,
Sarah admitted, her voice catching.
When you first told me about Diane. But I wasn't ready then. I'm sorry.
I pulled my daughter into a tight embrace, feeling the strength that had always been there, now tempered by wisdom beyond her years.
Thank you,
I whispered into her hair. Later that night, after our guests had gone and Sarah had retreated to her old bedroom, now her new home office, I sat alone in the kitchen with Emily's letter. Diane had sensed I needed privacy and had gone home, with plans to return for breakfast. With careful fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the paper, Emily's presence washing over me as I read. Harold, if you're reading this, then you've found someone who makes you smile again. Good. That stubborn heart of yours was made to love, and I couldn't bear the thought of it growing cold and lonely after I'm gone. Remember our song?
Love isn't something that we have, it's something that has us.
Love had us for 40 beautiful years, Harold. 40 years of burnt dinners and midnight talks, of Christmas mornings and hospital vigils, of ordinary Tuesdays that somehow became the most precious moments of all. Now love has found you again, differently but no less real. Please don't feel guilty for this gift. Your capacity to love again doesn't diminish what we shared, it honors it. Tell Sarah that her mother said to be kind, to be brave, to open her heart to whoever brings light to your eyes. Tell her that the greatest way to honor my memory isn't to guard it jealously, but to live with the same openness that she learned from both of us. I loved you first, Harold Widman, but I won't be the last. And that's exactly as it should be. Forever yours, among others, Emily. Tears streamed down my face, not the hollow tears of grief, but the full-bodied tears of gratitude, of being known so completely by another soul. Emily had given us both one final gift, permission to move forward without forgetting, to love again without betrayal, to honor her memory not by remaining static, but by continuing to grow. The next morning, I showed the letter to Sarah and Diane as we sat together at breakfast. Sarah wept openly, finally receiving the blessing she'd needed from her mother. Diane read it with quiet reverence, understanding the sacred trust being passed to her. That afternoon, we visited Emily's grave together, the three of us standing side by side in the winter stillness. Sarah placed fresh flowers against the headstone, while Diane stood respectfully back, giving us space while remaining present.
I think I'm ready now, Mom,
Sarah whispered to the stone.
Really ready to let you go, and keep you close at the same time.
As we turned to leave, Sarah reached for Diane's hand, the gesture spontaneous and genuine. They walked ahead of me toward the car, their breath visible in the cold air, their voices low in conversation. I lingered a moment longer at Emily's grave, my hand resting on the cold stone.
You were right, Em,
I said softly.
As always, life really is for the living.
A sudden breeze rustled through the bare branches above, sending a dusting of snow into the air that caught the sunlight like diamonds. And in that moment, I felt Emily's presence, not as a ghost or memory, but as a foundation beneath me, supporting each step forward into this unexpected new chapter. Ahead of me, Sarah laughed at something Diane said, the sound carrying clearly in the winter air. A sound Emily would have loved to hear. Our daughter, finding joy again after loss. Some might call it betrayal, moving forward after grief. But standing there between Emily's resting place and the living women waiting for me, I finally understood the deeper truth. Love doesn't divide when shared among more hearts. It multiplies, creating room for both memory and possibility, for honoring what was while embracing what could be.
Thank you,
I whispered one last time to Emily, then turned to join Sarah and Diane, stepping deliberately into the future we were building together. 3 people connected not by blood or conventional definitions, but by choice, by courage, and by love in all its complex, beautiful forms. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys of healing and transformation. Thank you for being part of our community where we share stories that touch the heart and heal the soul.